No.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about everything. We're going to talk about everything. It's going to be a jumble episode. Go, yes.
Yeah, so a bit of context. I watched part of an ADHD webinar from the Attitude website. For those that are unfamiliar, Attitude is kind of like a group of researchers-ish, scientists, I think, and
I can hear it already. I can hear your opinion just like seeping through.
Yeah,
researchers ish, scientists. Meh.
Well, it's really hard to tell because the articles they write aren't written as academic people. Like they don't use the terms, the words, and their referencing is a bit all over the place. And they reference themselves as well, like they self-reference, which inside of academia you can do if you have other publishers with the articles. But from what I can tell, the Attitude team publish all the articles. So they're essentially saying, look at my article for reference of the stuff that I'm saying, which that's what I mean by researchers. I'm like, if you're a researcher, that's bad practice in science. you need other people. That's why peer review things exist. They do reference some other papers, which I don't want to say they're cherry picked, but they seem to be very cherry picked because it's very much the papers that I'm finding that are being referenced are exactly what they're talking about. So either they've written an article and found a piece of research that backs up exactly what they're saying, or they found a research paper that they like and then tried to make an article around it. Right? I mean, if you're not an academic and you don't know how research methods work, then you just go, oh yeah, they're science-backed. And you're like, yes, but no. And that's why I said sort of. So they could be researchers. The way it comes across is it looks like one of my undergraduate essays. It's kind of like, I'm a researcher now, but I'm actually not because I still have really bad research methods because I never pay attention to the lectures. That's how it feels like. And I mean, don't get me wrong, the articles aren't bad, but there's room for improvement when it comes to being a research-backed article. But it's still better than a lot of the other anecdotal blogs out there. So it's still the best you can get from what I can find with ADHD. And the reason I'm doing this is because I'm trying to do this video about ADHD, and I did a vlog about it, and it's just a pain in the bum trying to do a video about something that I know is going to get a lot of backlash. And it's like, how do I do the video justice without pissing off loads of people, basically?
You're going to piss off loads of people.
I know, but it's
my suspicion, because I've just come back Thursday from like a 4-day retreat, and basically everyone identified as neurodiverse, and it was a wonderful, wonderful time. But I had some of the conversations with certain members in person, and there is such a difference between in person because you have so much more context. Right here, these conversations we're having are behind a screen, and you can get some nuance, but you really can't get the really tiny nuance, like the really, like, I don't know, the energetic nuance of the conversations. Even in like the most, I think podcasting and videos are probably the best form of like nuanced conversations because you can hear their voice, and on videos you can see their body language and you can actually take that in. But even then, I think for some of these conversations it's still not enough, and like the in-person conversation was just so much better, and like we could have the nuanced conversations. And I brought up some of the points that you mentioned because I'm like, yeah, I agree, because it's like it's turned into this thing where everyone is just saying that they're one thing because they've used it as a shorthand of what their struggles are, and it's like, yeah, that's right.
Did others agree? Did others agree or disagree?
Yes.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, they, from my interpretation of what we were talking about, yes, they did agree. And it's really like they agreed that it is societal because it is. It can't exactly not be.
That's interesting. That is interesting. I mean, I think my interpretation of individuals with neurodivergent, I was going to say like promotion, but it's not. Just people that talk about it online. It seems very one way in their conversation.
That's interesting, and I see why, because the people who are big on talking about ADHD and neurodiversity, and now, I'm big on talking about it. I'm literally, as of time of recording, probably when we actually go live, I would have already done a conference around this. Like I'm part of a neurodiverse conference, and I'm happy to do it. But I think the problem is that because there is this perception it's one way, when I think when you talk to the individuals rather than the kind of group think of it all, it becomes less nuanced because it's groupthink versus individuals talking about their individual struggles. And that's not to say that they don't exist, which is what you've never said, that it just because it's a societal construct, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. That is a misconception that you're probably fighting right now.
Oh yeah.
Because that is the assumption.
I'm gonna have to put like a philosophy section in there.
Yeah, I bet that is going to be really tricky to properly portray, because also you can't have two-way conversations, because I had multiple conversations with a group of neurodiverse individuals where we just spoke about that, and it was a back and forth, and they were open for it.
Yeah.
Because I tested the waters first with other and it was nice to have those conversations, just an open dialogue about it. Because I think there is like the people who live with it, so to speak, just saying that in a weird, not quite the right word I want, but that's the best I can do. Like people who actually experience it and live with it aren't the ones who are on TikTok talking about it necessarily. And I think that is the nuance that I'm starting to see after spending 4 days in person with a group of people who all identify as neurodiverse. They all identify as that, but they don't talk like people on TikTok. They laugh about their individual things that they do.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that is it was such a nice conversation. It was a joint understanding of how we all work in our own different ways. And it wasn't about us v them. It wasn't about neurotypical versus neurodivergent or neurodiverse. Like, it's very much just like, hey, these are the struggles that I have. This is my particular way of working. This is your particular way of working. Oh my gosh, we have similar ways. Yes, I completely agree with that. Yes, I agree with that. But it is very much tied to identity, which I think is the fight you're going to have, because you're attacked. It will be perceived as attacking a person's identity.
Oh, yes.
Very because much so. People don't hear, unless they listen to this podcast, which I don't know the percentage of people who listen to this podcast and watch your videos. I'm not sure anymore. They're not going to get the nuanced takes that you have. It'd be interesting to see who subscribes to both.
Yeah.
That'd be kind of intriguing.
Yeah.
Because this is where I think my interpretation, this is where you have your more nuanced takes. This is like
it's not necessarily the nuanced takes, but it's where I don't need to be as finalized.
Yeah.
With my view, like the stuff that goes on my channel has research, has notes, has loads of stuff formulated. To use one of the terms that I like to use is formulated opinions. I'm sharing formulated opinions that have background. There is research if people are interested. Which is why I haven't done this ADHD one, because the note is still sitting in the, hey, you've got loads of points in here that you've thought about, but you haven't actually written anything yet pile. Yeah.
I like that pile.
Yes. But yeah, so with this webinar that I attended for 20 minutes, I couldn't listen longer. It wasn't, I had to go. I chose to go because I felt uncomfortable being in there. There was this dynamic between a woman, researcher, she's doing PhD on something, special education, but she never explained what special education was. And then some other work on some other jargon type words, because I've never heard of them before. And then her son, who had Tourette's. And they were talking about ADHD, but they were using Tourette's as the example use case, which confused me a bit. So I was like, they're different things. They have different symptoms, but okay, you're going to talk about it. And the conversation that they were having was, he was a gymnast. And being someone that comes from gymnastics and trampoline, I have that sporting background. And being someone that's been in that gender bias environment, he struggled with some things that I struggled with. And he was saying, you can't do this, you can't do that, you shouldn't do this, you should do that. I struggled with these things. And I'm sitting there going, I've been in gymnastics. Yes, I'm in the UK, not in America. And I've been in trampoline, and I've worked with hundreds of top athletes. Some have been to the Olympics, some the Junior Olympics, some are just normal recreational people. And what he was saying wasn't Tourette specific, ADHD specific. Every single person that was involved in gymnastics was struggling with the things that he was talking about. And then the mum would then say, oh, and this is because of this thing that he has, and was giving different labels to different problems. And it was frustrating, because it was, the way I was perceiving it is, you were saying all of the struggles that these other people have, and I'm talking like thousands now, all these thousands of people that have these issues actually don't have the issues as bad, because they don't have this labeled thing, which could have been ADHD, Tourette's, or something else. And it was frustrating, the narrative she was building. And I'm like, the issues you're talking about aren't non-existent in other people. They still exist. They're just experienced differently. And it was just annoying. It's really annoying. I understand the narrative that she was pushing, that these people were struggling. And understandably, they were struggling because their behaviors, their tendencies differed from the environment that they were put in, because gymnastics is very regimented. If you want to get good, you have to train this amount of hours, you have to listen, you have to do blah, blah, blah. Loads of people struggle with being told what to do. It's not just those individuals that have Tourette's or ADHD. And I felt like I don't want to use the term, but the neurotypical were being attacked. It felt like an us v them webinar, rather than here's some issues and here's some ways to get around it. And I tried to stick it out. I really did. But I was just getting frustrated over and over and over. Everything she said, I was like, no, it literally felt like she was just poking at all the neurotypical people. And it was just so frustrating, which is why I had to leave.
Yeah, so it sounds like it was very much almost adding to the problem rather than
That's how it came
helping
across.
to move the conversation along, which I think is
the way it felt like to me is, no, I'm not diagnosed with ADHD. Loads of people have said you have tendencies of neurodivergence. So I don't identify with that group, because I don't think the identification between either group really helps. But typically I would be neurotypical, because I don't have the identification or the diagnosis to be neurodivergent. And I was going in there, and it felt like I had gone in to, when you're at school and you like join a conversation of the cool group or whatever that you're not part of, and everyone sort of looks at you like, what are you doing here? And then you just don't fit in the conversation. That's how it felt. I went in and I felt like I was stepping into like the cool group talk. And I was just getting like, everything they said wasn't directed at me, but it was like indirectly pushing at me. And I'm like, why?
So I find that really interesting, because my perception of you is neurodivergent. It's not neurotypical. But because you have not accepted that label, that it's interesting. Like, for you, you see yourself as neurotypical, like that label. If you have to label yourself, you see yourself as neurotypical, which for me is fascinating, because I do not see you as neurotypical, which is interesting. Like, just from a perception perspective, if you perceived yourself as neurodivergent in that call, how would your perception have shifted? And that's quite interesting for me, because I'm like, I wonder, like,
that's what was in my head, because a lot of people, adults, aren't diagnosed with ADHD because for loads of different reasons, they just haven't got a diagnosis. So I would
No
imagine
research, not enough research, not enough like actually being spread out in the world. Like it's only coming to fruition now, thanks to the same things that we are both critiquing in
yeah.
terms of TikTok, in terms of the marketing, in terms of all of the things. There is nothing fundamentally wrong with what's happening, but it's not enough. There's not enough conversation. Like it's still very much. I
It's
don't know.
it's a child's idea. It's not quite in adolescence yet. Because I
Yeah.
feel like it's sort of it sort of knows what it's doing, but it's kind of like all over the place. And then loads of people are taking it in different directions. There's no what I would class as order to the conversations, because you've got YouTube channels and TikTok channels talking supposedly about the same thing, the same behavior, the same symptom, but you watch the video and they could be about completely different diseases, issues, struggles, symptoms. I don't know what.
They're not diseases, and I still will stand by
Yeah,
that. I don't view like ADHD,
I mean
autism.
the official like label is a what is it, neurodevelopmental disorder.
Yeah.
But I can't find, this is something I said in my vlog, I can't find any research that actually has evidence of a neurodevelopmental change, difference. There are things that happen in the brain that is different in certain environments, but that means nothing, because you can take two people and they're going to be different activations in the brain, because anatomical modularity doesn't exist. Universality doesn't exist. The brain isn't the exact same in each person. So activation in different places at different times with different levels doesn't mean anything. It's just information. There's no answers there. It's just information. So you can't say this person is developing in their brain differently from this person, so much so that they hit this barrier of this categorization, because everyone is different in the way that their brain works, and we don't know enough about how the brain works to say this is a developmental disorder. I mean, not being funny, people with half a brain have more logic, sense, knowledge than people with a full brain sometimes. How does that work? In theory, if they've got half a brain, they should have a neurodevelopmental disorder, because hey, they've only got half a brain. They can't function the same way as everyone else. Yet they still can. It's frustrating. And which is why I'm like, ADHD is a thing. Like, which is why social construct is just to me, the most appropriate words to use. The argument I would probably go with for explaining social construct is money, because money is a social construct. It is just paper. Like when you actually look at what money is, it's paper. Without human beings giving arbitrary values to the numbers on the paper, money doesn't exist. You need a society for money to exist. It's a social construct. Is it real money? Yes. Otherwise, hello, look at the world. So it's a real thing, but it's a social construct. And that's how I see ADHD. It's a real thing, but it's a social construct, because without people talking about all of the symptoms and issues and struggles and behavioral tendencies, it doesn't exist. Like, it's not a thing, if that makes sense.
I think my perception of this conversation has shifted quite dramatically. I know that I was very much, I hate you right now, but I don't know why. When we first had this conversation, it's just like instantly disagreeing. But when you were saying like symptoms, I don't even see it as symptoms anymore. It is just pieces of the puzzle, because a symptom means it needs to be removed or got rid of. And my whole entire philosophy is around using what you've got. And if you can use what you've got, what if this quote unquote issue, this thing that happens for you, isn't a bad thing? What then? And I was having conversations with a number of people at the event of like, what if this thing you feel is bad isn't actually bad? What if you could use that thing? I mean, this is my business philosophy in a nutshell. Like, instead of trying to, like, for example, your template has been perfect for me. I've now flexed and moved it around, because instead of trying to fix my chaotic brain, I'm using it.
Yep.
I am using it in the easiest way possible, and it's bloody working. I am getting more done, capturing one and all that, capturing more ideas, and able to focus more than I ever have before because I know where I'm going, I know where I'm putting it, and I go in there. This morning I was literally in there going, "Oh yeah, I remember that," because I knew where I was going and I knew where I needed to go. And that's all a system needs to do.
Yes.
It just needs to provide that boundary where you can go in and play. And that is why, like, that is what I do with my clients. That is what I do in my work. And all of that, instead of thinking of it like symptoms, it is just pieces of you that exist instead of things that must be solved. You are disordered.
I was going to say, but it's a disorder, and to have a disorder, there needs to be symptoms.
And I have a feeling, now I can't speak for every neurodiverse individual, but for me, I reject that. I reject this disorder. That does not mean it doesn't suck sometimes.
But hey,
It does
so
not
does life.
mean, like, that does not mean that these things get in the way where for other people who do not have these things, it doesn't mean and it doesn't dismiss any of that, but it also doesn't dismiss the other person who doesn't have that, which I think is the danger of what's happening in the space.
I've said it a couple of times. The words I would prefer to use instead of symptoms is behavioral tendencies. Because in my head, that's what they are. You have behavioral tendencies in certain environments because of the way that you think, the way you perceive the world, and your prior experience impacting your current actions, which we know through ecological psychology and parts of cognitive psychology, depending on which parts you're picking out. That's how we work, because some of cognitive psychology is just like throw it in the bin. But people haven't done that yet because there's too many researchers that say, no, this is my life's work. I don't care. You're wrong. Yeah. Anyway, and I think because of those, because of those, what I would class as behavioral tendencies, when you look at the pieces of paper that say, oh, you are or are not this thing called ADHD, when you match up the symptoms, they are tendencies of behavior. And like I said, I think a couple of episodes ago now, you can have a person that doesn't have the behavioral tendencies, not symptoms, that doesn't have the behavioral tendencies because something else is going on. Anxiety is a perfect example of that, because a lot of the behavioral tendencies that are typically seen as symptoms of ADHD can be mitigated, I guess you'd say, by anxiety. You're not going to shout out in a group because you're worried about it. You're not going to act up and be really energetic because you might be worried about it. So all the hyperactivity of ADHD, you might not have any of those symptoms because you also have anxiety in the social environment that you're in. You take yourself out of that, example, school environment, take yourself out of that, you go home, well, now you're all over the place because you're not anxious and now you're suddenly hyperactive. Well, you can't have ADHD out of school and in home. Like, that's not possible according to the researchers of ADHD. You have it when you're born and you have it all the time and you can't get rid of it. But they're tendencies. It's anyway, that was the webinar experience and the things that was going through my head. It was just so frustrating.
Combative.
Yeah. Well, I guess it didn't hit my expectations, which probably made it like worse from my perception. Because I was thinking, oh, researchers, I'm curious to see what I thought was going to be critique is of the research, because that's what researchers do. They look at the positives, they look at the negatives, and then they discuss the in-between bit. But it just looked like they looked at the positives and then they just poked all the other people. And you're like, it's annoying. It might have changed afterwards, but after 20-25 minutes, and it was an hour-long webinar, so I was basically halfway through, and I was like, we're halfway through this. All that this woman has done is irritated me. And it's kind of like confirmed my thesis of there being an us v them, and it's just a pain in the bum.
Could you not do you not feel that there's a possibility that they did critique, or do you think it wasn't enough critique?
From what she was saying, the critique that she would have done must have been extremely shallow or very paradigm specific. So she's looked at an area of research, be it ADHD in gymnastics. But when you type in ADHD in gymnastics, you're going to get ADHD in gymnastics. You're not going to get people that are looking from a different perspective because you're so narrow in your search. And that's where, for me, a competent researcher, yes, that does mean that she's potentially incompetent. That's by my definition. A competent researcher will look at the research, go, okay, I'm now going to use my own intuition and say, can this be refuted? Is there another perspective? Is there another way you can look at this? Is this exactly true? Looking at the epistemology of the research. And if there is no critique in the research you found, then it must be somewhere else. It can't not exist because the true does exist. So the false must exist somewhere else. Finding that can be very difficult because it might be in a completely different field of research. I found some things that go against... Exactly. I found some things that go completely against constraints-led approach to coaching. And it wasn't in cognitive psychology. It was in some really weird teacher thing. It was like primary school teaching saying that constraints-led approach doesn't work. It does. They just misinterpreted what it meant because their references were from J.J. Gibson, which is like 1970 something, and they didn't look at the coaching research because teachers and coaches, they're so different. They're really not. So they argued against it because of their lack of knowledge elsewhere, because professions and researchers don't talk, which is a pain. But it was there. There was still a falsity to this truth of knowledge. And I can then look backwards and forwards and go, oh, these people didn't talk. That interpretation is slightly different to that interpretation. That's led to these answers. That's led to those answers. And actually, when you look at it, they're very, very similar. But the things that these people couldn't do, these people have solved. So you can sort of like, I'll match that up together. And it feels like the ADHD webinar was the teachers that was looking at this really old research. I'm not saying it's old research. I'm just saying from this analogy, really old research, and not looking at anyone else that's talking about anything that's similar. Cognitive psychology, for example. Ecological psychology, for another example. Like, it doesn't seem like any of those fields of research was put into what she was saying. It felt like the research that she was looking at was just the behavioral analysis that people have done with people that have ADHD. What about the people that
honestly,
don't?
I actually find the research exceptionally lacking.
Yeah.
Like, I have looked at the research and I'm just like, as someone who is neurodiverse, this isn't enough. Like,
as soon as you want to know more, when the researchers say, oh, we found this, where have you found it? Where is science showing?
And I think that's the problem with this form of research, because I wanted to go deep into this. This is what I was going to focus on. But as soon as you start looking at it, it's like, it's just super weird. And like, this goes back to the not as high level research, but things like, not saying TikTok is research, it's just very bad, but yeah. But when you look at things like TikTok and they're saying, oh, put a finger down if you have this, put a finger down if you have this. Well, what if I don't put my fingers down? Does that mean I'm not? But that's the thing. I'm diagnosed, but like, I have similar behavioral tendencies to ADHD. Do I have a diagnosis of ADHD? No, I have a diagnosis of autism. However, I also have social anxiety. I also have the inability to leave the house, which I'm still recovering from. So what happens, as you were talking earlier about, what happens when you strip the layers back? What does that mean then? Do I have ADHD? Do I not? And for me, it doesn't really matter. Like, it doesn't matter to me. I am neurodiverse because I am That is, I like that. It's part of who I am, but that doesn't make me what I am. It's not all of me. It is a part of me. It is a nice little pocket of things that I have that I struggle with. My anxiety, my depression, my like autism. All of those things are part of who I am because they are. I can't deny them. If I deny them, then I'm denying myself, which sucks and isn't actually very helpful. But it's also not all of who I am. And that is, I think, where my divergence comes from. It is, I don't agree that I can't do anything. I just have to do things in my way, which is kind of what everyone needs to do. If more people did that, this wouldn't be a thing, which I think is something that I can see because everyone's like, oh, I'm struggling with this. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, me too. Okay, here's what I do. What do you think? Do you like that? No? Okay, here's another thing you can do. But that's because of my brain and the way that my individual brain works. If you look into things like human design and how like if you look at that's fascinating. I love human design because it's very like it has that spiritual element, but it's also very like it kind of combines lots of different methodologies together. And I'm like, that's really quite nice. I like it when you combine everything together.
Well,
Because it's
lots of things.
Lots of when you combine lots of things together, it's like you're almost evidencing up. It's like it's more information that you can use. And I enjoy that, like getting into the nitty-gritty of all the gates and all that stuff, because it's a nice translation of the complexities of who we are. Like the complexities of identity. Oh, look at that. And posh phrase there. But it's true. And we are complex individuals. And I feel that especially the social media aspect of it is oversimplification.
You sound like me.
I know, right? I was just like, oh, that doesn't even sound like me. But I agree. It is true. It's oversimplified. It is so like we're putting people in boxes, which is the exact bloody problem that people with neurodiversity are trying to avoid.
Right. Pause. Like 2 months ago, I was you. Like you, what you're saying is exactly what I was saying like 2 months ago.
Yeah.
And when you were listening to exactly what you were saying, you're like, and now you're like emphasizing it. I was like, ooh.
Yeah, and even when I was like, my what I had there was like, yes, but I don't like it. I agreed with you even then. I just didn't like it. And that's where I was at there. I was like, yeah, but you're attacking me. But you weren't. And to clarify, I'm not attacking anyone who has it. It would be really funny if I was, because I'm exactly like it. If I am attacking you, I'm attacking me.
Exactly.
Which I'm not, because I know my struggles. They may not be the same as yours, which they probably aren't. There'll be similar like traits that we share, but it will not be exactly the same. And that is the thing that I enjoy the more nuanced conversations where we talk about what it actually means.
And what you've summarized quite nicely there is exactly why researching ADHD is so difficult. Because ADHD is a social construct, you can't say someone has or hasn't got it. So you don't have a binary number to say, okay, the people that have it do this thing, the people that don't have it do those things, because the people that don't have it might have elements of it. So you can't say that it does or doesn't work. So you can't create comparisons because you don't know if they have or haven't got it, unless you used diagnosed individuals. But they could be diagnosed by different people. So even though they're diagnosed, they're not the same.
Yeah.
It's just not possible. So when you look at any sort of quantitative research analysis inside of ADHD, it's just not possible, because you can't have a group of ADHD and a group of not ADHD, because there's going to be similarities in their behaviors, because it's a social construct. It's using the paper analogy with money, right? If you have a piece of paper, well, you have two pieces of paper, one with a 5 written on it, one that looks like a £5 note. How do you decide which one is money? Well, it's the people. But if you're not from the UK and you don't use pounds, well, that pound isn't money.
Yeah.
So maybe it's the dollar is the $5, which is money, or whatever other currency. It's just a piece of paper with something that you've put on it that people from a certain culture say, that's my currency. That's my money. Yeah, but it's not that person's money. Yeah, but they're the same thing. They're both pieces of paper with 5s on. No, they're not. They're different. And you're like, who's right? Everyone.
Yeah.
And you can't do research like that. It's not possible. That's where qualitative research comes in, and that's where you start asking people. But who do you ask? The people that have it, i.e. diagnosed with it, the people that don't have it, but might just not be diagnosed yet. You just can't do it, which is why the research is so poor, so limited, which is why when I hear people say, oh, research says this, science says that, yeah, but where? Where does it do it? And how did they do it? Because I can't find it. I mean, I'm not saying I'm the best researcher or blah, 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 but I've spent hours trying to find it. And if it was there, it should be easy to find. Not really, really difficult, like pulling blood from a rock. Right.
Good.
Yes. I actually wanted to talk about Obsidian today.
Cool. Let's go.
Right. The reason I want to talk about Obsidian, a couple of reasons. One, I'm updating my course when Obsidian do the next update thing, so I wanted to briefly discuss that. But two, Obsidian October. Obviously, they've got the Obsidian October event going on, and I wanted to talk about that. For those who are unfamiliar, you can go into the Discord and you can see it. But basically, if you make a video, you make a plugin, I think write a blog post is another one, then you're submitted, I guess, into Obsidian October, which is where the Obsidian team give out sort of awards in the Discord for people that contribute to the Obsidian community. And I really like it because it's a way, I was speaking to another developer of Morgan, and it's another way to get people involved in activities. Like, if you're not a content creator, you can look at Obsidian October and go, oh yeah, I'll write a blog post, or I'll make a video about Obsidian because they use Obsidian. If you're not a developer or a programmer, you can go, I'm going to create a theme with CSS, or I'm going to go a bit further like me and be really stupid and create a plugin because they're just like extremely difficult to make as a beginner because the documentation for all of code is stupid. But it gives you those opportunities, and the community is really useful, really helpful. And I see Obsidian future, like the future of Obsidian, as really bright because of the event, but also the community that's around Obsidian. Like, I went into the Notion community stuff recently, and I don't see any help anymore. It's all business pushing, and I'm like, cool. Where's the people helping other people? Where's the people talking about the things that they do? Like, I don't know whether it's like outgrown it. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, I feel sad about the Notion community now because I haven't got a problem with monetization. I am a business and we need to make some monies. Duh. But there is no people helping people.
It's going to be interesting. I'm going to a meetup, or I'm planning to anyway, next week in London with the Notion meetup.
I wish I could come. I can't.
Yeah, so I'm going to go there, and obviously I'm going to be speaking to a load of Notion people. I'm not a Notion person anymore. And it's going to be interesting to see how, sort of like why they're there, what they're using Notion for, how they're using Notion, because I had a call yesterday with someone that uses Notion, and they wanted to use Notion to track some stuff in their football team, or their son's football team. And they were struggling because of the roll-up situation, the relational roll-up situation, the way that Notion databases work, because once you've got a relation in there, you can't like add up the amount of relations very easily. And what essentially he was doing was he had a score relation, and then he just wanted to add like a person in every time they scored. But once you've got a relation in there, you can't add any more. In Obsidian, that's easy. You just add a name, add a number next to the name for how many goals they scored, and there you go. There's your total. And I don't think people in Notion recognize what Obsidian can do on the more powerful side, with the task plugin, the data view plugin, calendar, and all the other stuff.
I had a conversation with someone over the last because she was there like, oh, I'm an Obsidian user. And I'm like, oh, there's another Obsidian user in this retreat. I'm a very happy person. I showed her what I do in Obsidian. She's like, wait, you can do all of this in Obsidian? Yes, you can. Oh, I've barely scratched the surface. I'm like, I know, me too. And I think you said it in one of your Patreon videos around like we don't realize what all of the options and the possibilities, because it's just so simple to use, and all of the options are beautifully hidden away until you want them. And there are functionality that you thought, like the folder thing. I still cannot believe I missed that after using Obsidian for what, 4 or 5 months, maybe even longer.
Yeah, it must have been.
I didn't realize that was a thing you could do and a thing you could change, and it was part of the core functionality. And nobody talks about it.
But the thing is, this is something that I'm actually going to do on my channel right now. Is that because I was using DaVinci Resolve, or I am using DaVinci Resolve now for my editing, and what I found myself doing was I don't know how to move text. Like when you put a text thing on the screen, I didn't know like where the buttons were, so I just YouTubed it. And there was a couple of creators. One really sticks out in mind. I know what he looks like. I don't know the name of the channel because I didn't pay attention. I subscribed and I get notifications, but I don't know the name of the channel because but they were like 3-4 minute videos of how to do this small thing in DaVinci Resolve, and there were loads of them. Like every time I had like anything, how do I change audio, how do I move this without moving that, how do I cut here without cutting this, it was always his face that appeared in like the top 5 somewhere, and it was just like a 2 to 6 minute video explaining how to do the thing. Yeah, there was some video fluff around it, but it just told me what I needed. And when I tried to do the same thing for Obsidian, do you know what it did? It threw up my 1 hour 15 minute video, and then a couple of other how to get started with Obsidian videos that tell you all the same thing. Like, this is how you make a vault. This is how you save your folders. This is how you make a new folder. I'm like, great, yeah, but I don't want any of that. I want this really small nuanced thing that's actually hidden in a setting somewhere. And if you don't know what the setting is you're looking for, you can't use my long video to find it, because then you'd have to watch the whole hour 15 for every single thing you want to find, which is obviously a pain in the bum, but that's not what that video was for. So my plan is to do videos just about really specific like questions. The one that came out today, what's the time? That comes out today is how to back up your notes with Obsidian Git. Obsidian Git is a community plugin, but if you don't know how to use Git, you don't know how to use GitHub, you don't know how to use a terminal, and you don't know Obsidian Git is a thing, you're not going to back up your notes like that. And you're going to try and back up your notes in some cloud, which is a pain in the bum because local files going into a cloud, then you have to sync it. How do you sync it? Do you manually do that? How do you set up the automatic backup on each individual system? And then how do you back up the plugins? Because plugins aren't as easy to back up as you would think. And Git is just the easiest way to back everything up. Plus you have a history. So even if you do delete stuff, you have all of the history, all of the changes. And it's actually a really simple process. Like, once you know how to do it.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'll make a video on that. I've also done a blog post as well, which matches, so you can go to either one. And it's 10 minutes going over how to back up your notes in Obsidian. And then there are other things like how to find autocorrect in Obsidian. Like when you're typing stuff out in the YAML or front matter, you can autocorrect that. So instead of having to type out whatever the thing is in your tags or whatever, it just autocorrects. Yeah, your tag automatically has autocorrect, but any YAML information can have it because there's a plugin for it. Actually, there's 2, but there's plugins for it. And when you're typing in Obsidian, you didn't know that, okay. When you're typing in Obsidian, typing words, if there's a common word in the page, it also finds the autocorrect, and you can have that in there.
What?
Yeah, there's 2 plugins. There's 2 plugins that do that. Anyway, and then you got like recurring tasks and loads of other things you can do in Obsidian.
For fuck's sake!
Yeah, whether it's core or whether it's community, you need to pay attention to the community plugins. But all of that stuff is in Obsidian.
No, I don't. Otherwise, I will never get anything done.
Very true. I've gone through 100 so far. I've got like 550 to go. They're all going to be in the course. Don't worry. Yeah, no. Well, all the good ones anyway, because there are some outdated, crappy, broken ones as well. But yeah, so all those small features, you don't know they're there unless you go looking for them. Completer. I can see you searching completer. There's no E though. And those sort of nuanced use cases, plugins or things that I like saw in DaVinci Resolve is what I want to do, because Obsidian, unlike Notion, has all this sort of small, nice things, and Notion just throws everything at you. Like, here's a database, and if you click everywhere, there's a GUI system, and you can figure out how to do stuff. Data view, there isn't a GUI system. You can't just push buttons and say, I want to go from filter here, and you actually have to type it out. And there's no instructions for how to type it out. It's all data view codey stuff, which is scary. Yeah. And all the other plugins are very similar. There's no, I want to add this thing, so you just push it. You'd need to find the community plugin that has the setting that you want, but you don't know it has the setting because it doesn't, you can't search for that. Yeah, it says it in the description of the plugin, but that means you'd have to go through every single community plugin to find the setting that you want. No. So what do people do? Google it, YouTube it. Where isn't it shown? YouTube, Google. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking of doing. Is just be like, you can do this thing in Obsidian.
It only has 7,800 downloads.
I know.
That's insane.
I know. It's been out for like 7 months as well. It's quite an old plugin. I was having a look at the GitHub repository for those unfamiliar. But yeah, I was looking at the GitHub repo, and there's been a couple of updates recently because of the 0.16 plus updates that's been happening, but because obviously the view changed a little bit because of the theme change. But yeah, and as you will probably experience when you go into Obsidian and turn it on, when you go into the front matter, you can type out something and it'll just give you a pop-up box of like, is this what you wanted? Enter. Is this what you wanted? Enter. Because I was doing that with my plugin thingy, my plugin vault, and I had stars, and I didn't want to have to go Windows dot star star star, Windows dot star star, Windows dot star 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 star, because this is a pain. And I didn't want to go copy and paste because then you have to backspace the amount of stars. And because I had 1 to 5 stars in any of the pages around, I just went up to the top, pushed space next to the front matter, and it just gave me a list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll go 3, down, down, enter. It makes life so much easier.
Okay, I'm gonna have fun with that later.
But that's what I want to do with the Obsidian stuff. And I think Obsidian, moving forwards into the future, has so much possibility because of the flexibility of plugins.
Yeah, I wish it would go mainstream because I think it would help so many people.
Something that I found that I'm really excited about, even though Obsidian I don't know how to do it because I don't know development well enough, is VS Code. For those unfamiliar, VS Code is an IDE, which basically means it's a text editor for code, basically. So you open it up and you type it. It looks very similar to Obsidian, or Obsidian looks very similar to VS Code, depending on which one you go from. But in VS Code, there are plugins, or they call them extensions, which are very similar. And in VS Code, there is live editing. You create a workspace, i.e., you just say, hey, I want to go live. You send a link to someone, and they come in, and they live edit with you. But VS Code are local files. So it's exactly the same system as Obsidian, but there's live editing, and you can send a link out and just live edit. You can see the person, they type, you type, same time, no conflict of files. It's just editing in code. And I'm thinking, if we can have something like that in Obsidian, there's your collaboration.
You get collab, you're going to get businesses in there fast.
Oh, yeah. But it's already in VS Code. I mean, from someone that doesn't know that much about development yet, I'm just going to say this, and all the developers are going to scream at me, but it's just a case of copying the plugin. Yeah. I know it's much more complex than that, but the same sort of system. I said the same to the developer of Morgan, or one of the developers of Morgan, because Morgan can integrate with Obsidian now. It wouldn't be as fluid as we would want it, but it could happen. And that is something that I want to happen and may happen in the future because I've spoken about it a few times now. But we might be able to see the Obsidian pop-up inside of the Morgan pop-up that we get inside of Obsidian side panel, and then tick off add task inside of Obsidian side panel, which would reduce the need to use the global hotkey, which is very nice. But because of the way Obsidian works with tasks, because all tasks have an identification, you could put a tag, a Morgan tag on a task, and then the Morgan plugin read it as a Morgan task and add it to your Morgan, which means you can add tasks to Morgan, which is your calendar. So a task in Obsidian would be created by Obsidian, and it would be added to your calendar as an event, because all of Morgan tasks are events. I mean, I know it's not an all-in-one app, but I mean that's pretty powerful.
That's pretty nuts, actually.
I mean, that's adding and taking away events using Obsidian that syncs to whatever calendar, because that's what Morgan is. It goes to whatever calendar. And if you have settings inside of the Obsidian task that Morgan can take, i.e. other tags, so hashtag Morgan, hashtag events, so it takes the events calendar in your Morgan account, well, now it's going to add a task to your events calendar, because that Morgan can just pull information from the task, just like
Morgan
the task
do that,
plugin
I'll
does.
switch, I'll pay the extra couple of quid it would cost for me to change from Fantastical.
Well, that's what I said to the developers of Morgan. I was like, if you can get Morgan functioning inside of Obsidian, most people that use Obsidian will probably use Morgan because it's already local. Like, Obsidian users are already local users. They're not big cloud-based users. And Morgan brings things more local because it's a local app on your computer rather than having to go to your browser and figure out Google Calendar. Yeah, yeah, exactly. But yeah, what do you see the future of Obsidian?
It depends on the direction that they go. It depends on what decisions they make. Because I think if they could get the community that Notion has now, or no, the community that Notion had.
Hold up.
The community that Notion had, not what they have now. Because I'm going to be hot takey. They don't have a community now. They just have a bunch of business people who are trying to make as much money as possible now. Yeah, it's not the same. It isn't the same. And that is fine if that is the space you want to be in. And there are people making tons of money, and fair enough. Good for you. Like, I don't have a problem with that. But for me, I want to be in a community of people who love to support each other, to help people like actually be productive in their own way and create options that fit them. I'm not interested in just making a shit ton of money. I want to make a shit ton of money. Of course I do. Who doesn't? Like, I want to do that, and I will do that. But I also want to be part of a community of people who like start from them instead of just like are actually working to help people too, not just make a ton of money.
Something I've noticed is, so on Discord, there is a Tools for Thought Discord channel, which was the Notion Discord channel. They changed it because it was getting too big for Notion. It's a really poor Discord channel, in my opinion, because they've separated all the app users in there through different channels, but the Obsidian app users are in the Obsidian Discord. The Remnote app users are in Remnote Discord in their server. So all of the app users that actually use the app go to the other Discord server. If you're a Notion user that uses those apps, then you're in there. But if you're a Notion user using those apps, you're a Notion user. And I'm getting people, because I'm still an ambassador in that server, I get people asking me questions about Notion. And I'm like, well, you could do this, this, or this, but it's much easier in Obsidian because that's what I use. Oh, why did you switch to Obsidian? Because it's just better. Like, it just is. And to me, it's worrying that people are going to the side panel asking a Notion ambassador that hasn't been in the Notion Discord for over a year. I haven't posted anything in there for over a year. I haven't done anything Notion related publicly for more than over a year, like a year and a half now. But people are still directly messaging me because I'm just linked there and being like, hey, can you help me? If they're reaching out to people in the side channel rather than the general chat or the Q&A or anything else in the Discord can't be doing its job properly, which is the whole point of a community. You ask a question, you get answers to a question. You go into the Obsidian Discord and ask a question, you got like 10 people giving you different answers. That's good, both good and bad. Because you're like, oh, which one do I listen to? And it doesn't really matter how complicated you are. I mean, I asked a question about plugin development. I got 4 answers. Now, that's plugin development. That's complicated stuff, complicated codey stuff, and there's loads of developers in there. And the new discussions forum chat channel thing that's come to Discord is really nice.
It is. I've seen that. I like that. It's so nice.
Where did you see it?
I've seen it in. You mean like the forum style Discord? Yeah, I really like that. Like that actually makes me want to use Discord because I miss good old forums. I liked forums. I thought they were great.
Yeah, I mean, I've got one. I put one.
You did
forum discussion channel in the Discord, and now I thought they were threads to start with, but they're not. But they're like threads. They're just better versions of threads.
They're like evolved forms of threads. Yeah, I love them. I think they're brilliant. They are very much like a forum discussion thing. I want to use Discord more now because of that.
Yeah, and that's why I put it in there, because I feel like anyone. Because I had threads for like Obsidian Q&As, Hatcher Q&A, but the threads either disappeared or you'd have to try and find them or look for. You go into the discussion, you search for it. It's just easy to get there, and you can then read through what people have said and what's going on. And I would imagine, I don't know, but in the future they can like tier the discussions. I mean, at the moment it's recent activity sorted, but yeah. So then you get the popular channels at the top, which makes life much easier than scrolling through, like, because when you look at the Obsidian channels, there are so many. You go in there as the beginning, you're like, where do I start?
Yeah. Yeah, it is quite tough. But yeah, I'm just there. I just opened it up because it's like, so nice. It's just like love. It's so easy to use, and I can just see so much. Like from a business perspective, if I was to like. Currently, I have a businessy people community that's in Facebook, but I could very quickly use Discord for this because of like the discussions thread. I would probably personally use the discussions thread more than I would use like the standard chat stuff.
I think what the forum threads do is like voice channels are second to text channels, but text channels are second to threads when you're looking for a specific conversation. Forums, I think, replaces all of them. I think forums then goes like at the top. So you default to your forum, then you'd go to your thread for a specific conversation, if you even need a thread. And the text channel sort of level, and then your voice chat's like at the bottom. But it has all of those features there if you need them. I don't know whether you saw, but also in the moderation tab, there's an auto mod bot that they brought in, the default auto mod. And that's quite powerful. Like I was playing with it, and it's quite powerful with what you can do. So moderation I mean, I don't need any moderation really on my server because no one's an idiot. Thank you. I mean, you're the only mod and you're hardly in there.
Pretty much. I have it open, but it's just like, yeah, cool. All right.
I'm guessing you probably just sit there, look at the odd message here and there, and you're like, oh, yeah, nice. Because there's nothing to moderate.
Yeah, there's nothing to do. I'm just like, oh, cool. Look what Danny's doing. Oh, look what questions that people are asking. That's interesting.
Yeah, there was something brought up about Scribe. I think it's an iPad thing or a tablet.
Yeah, I did see that, and I actually remember going and look it up.
Yeah, so I was like, what's that? I never got around to looking it up. But yeah, it's exciting, and something that when talking to the Morgan developer that was interesting is the way, because I asked him, why don't you think calendar apps and task management apps have the same flexibility as something like Obsidian? Long story short, Obsidian has more things that you can attach API things too, so you can change them. In a calendar, you can't really say, hey, take this event whole schedule thing and move it somewhere or change the color of it somehow, because from a Cody perspective, there's HTML and CSS on each of those bits to make it something, to make it a class. So it makes it very difficult to add plugins because there's hardly anything you could add anything to, unless you have like a side panel of plugin options, which is a possibility in Morgan because you've already got the side tab that pops up. But the reason I asked is I can't think of another app, a calendar app, that has the same customization features as Obsidian or Roam, Logseek to a lesser extent. And he said there just isn't because of the limitation. As soon as you add a calendar app into Morgan, into Obsidian, you then get all the plugin features, all the other features, and you just, I think that would be, the way I see it in my head is Notion isn't an all-in-one app because it's got limitations. I see Obsidian more as an all-in-one app because of the ability to add community plugins. And as soon as you can add something like a calendar plugin that functions as a calendar inside of Obsidian, then it becomes more of a...
My brain's just got... Can you actually, so you know with the tasks where you put the date and stuff, can that actually be put... As of now, is there a plugin to put it and attach it to a calendar as well?
Well, you
have data view.
Well, yeah, data view, big calendar, fantasy calendar. There's another calendar as well that does something similar. I mean, Google Keep is already synced into Obsidian, so is Todoist. I think there is a Google Calendar plugin as well, but it's not great, that syncs your calendar account and shows it in Obsidian. So you have external syncs going into Obsidian, and you have calendars in Obsidian. Fantasy Calendar, I think, is probably the most fleshed out. There's still a couple of bugs in there, but Fantasy Calendar is built for D&D people. But you can just use it as a normal calendar. Nicole Van Horen, I think her name is, did a video on it on YouTube. But it's because she's a D&D player, it's narrated as a D&D calendar. So unless you know Obsidian and you know what you could do with it, or you listen to that part of the video, which actually happens to be towards the end of the video, which people don't tend to get to, you can use Fantasy Calendar as your normal calendar. And you can add events, you can add tasks, you can schedule things, you can give, I guess you'd say, different calendar colors to things. And because it's D&D, you can literally make anything. So you could, instead of weeks, it could be something else. Just rename what weeks are, rename how many weeks there are in the year. You got moon settings, and there's so much stuff in there.
Okay, that's another plugin for me to enable and play with. Thank you.
That plugin will take you a while to play with because there are you literally create the calendar.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's Fantasy Calendar. You can push the preset plugin for a Gregorian calendar, which is like a normal calendar, and it automatically puts in the holidays as well, which is nice because it's got an API out to the default Gregorian calendar. Yeah.
I like that. You're going to have to tell me about that when we finish because I'm intrigued.
Yeah, but this is what I mean by all of the plugins that are there, but you can't, if you want to use them for a use case like a real life use case, you need to know about the plugin, then you need to be able to connect the plugin with the thing you want it to do, which just isn't around at the moment.
Yeah.
But like I say, I think because of the flexibility Obsidian has with the plugins, I don't know whether you
can't wait for an API. I just can't wait.
Yeah, they're working on it. They're working on a whiteboard at the moment instead, plus obviously all the 0.16 stuff. Whiteboard, corkboard. Well, corkboard, whiteboard, same sort of thing, plugin. Yeah, that's going to be a cool feature.
That'd be really cool.
Well, they're working on it, so. But I don't know whether it would be classed as an Obsidian app or not, because I feel like the Obsidian app is the core plugins. The Obsidian community app is the community plugins, if that makes sense. Because someone's Obsidian can not look like someone else's Obsidian. Like the CSS is different, the plugins are different, the entire workspace drastically different, but the behind the scenes is still Obsidian.
Yeah.
Whereas Notion always looks like Notion. It always works like Notion. If I was to go into someone's Obsidian, and they have data view queries everywhere. They're using the Fantasy Calendar plugin. They're using the Memo plugin. They're using Big Calendar plugin. They're using tasks as well in queries. They're using Abomination or Abdomination with all the callout blocks. Like they're using the normal callout blocks, and then the that's the callout plugin that was used for callouts until callouts was brought into core, but it still has more functionality than the core plugins. Yeah, Abdomination, I think it's called. But yeah, and they have that in the page. And then when you're looking at Obsidian, you've got callout blocks, you've got queries inside of callout blocks, which is in my course. We can talk about that afterwards. And then you've got all these side panels and plugins and different workspaces, and you can have images inside. Like you can have a banner at the top. And I don't want a banner
You
at the
can
top.
have buttons.
Oh yeah, and buttons that function. Like you can have inline buttons that function and allow you to add information into pages. And then you've got Notion databases as well as a plugin. You can add that in there. All of that stuff in someone's workspace, or just a normal bog standard Obsidian type text in file. They're the same app, but they're not the same app. Is Obsidian the closest all-in-one app? I don't know, but it's damn close. And with the API, it's going to get even closer.
I think that's when it's going to get really fucking interesting.
I mean, you've already got most apps inside of Obsidian. Like the Google suite of apps, the only Google suite of apps you don't have inside of Obsidian is Google Calendar and the size limit of files. Because when I'm recording something on my phone, I put it into my Obsidian and it syncs to my computer, which is literally a cloud drive. It does the features of a cloud drive. You're just limited to, I think, 5 megabytes with sync to sync them across devices. But it still does small things, which is what I use it for.
Okay.
I have no idea what you're looking at, but
we're going to have chats now because I'm just like, oh, all these things that you've mentioned. And I'm like, oh, yes, please.
These are all videos I plan on putting on the YouTube channel. And the way that I see the course and the YouTube channel is, because this is what I struggle with in Notion. I would do the nuanced videos, but they'd only help the people that want that nuanced example, which YouTube doesn't like, because YouTube goes, oh, that video was bad. It wasn't bad. It's just there's not that many people looking for that solution right now. Because some of the Notion videos that I put out did pants for the first like 3-4 weeks. And then suddenly everyone gets hold of, oh, there's a video about how to do this thing. And it explodes, like relative. And I feel like these Obsidian videos will be similar. But some of the videos, there's going to be so much nuance that could be added that I don't want it to be an hour-long video of how to use this plugin. I just want it to be, this is how you get this plugin set up on YouTube. Like, this is how you get started with this thing. If you want to know more, go to the course, and then we'll have loads of other small nuanced videos. Because that makes more sense to me, one, from a business perspective, and two, from a helpful perspective, because I don't want people to have to go through like 51-hour videos on my channel.
Yeah.
But yeah, so be prepared for lots of shorter, hey, did you know you could do this video in Obsidian?
Sounds fun.
Yeah, kind of took over the end there, but
it's all right.
Yeah. Have you changed your use in Obsidian at all, or are you still?
I'm starting to play a little bit more with. So I've added a new tag.
That's actually quite big, considering you don't have that many tags like me.
Yeah, so I've added a new tag. So one of the things that I was doing at the retreat was to do with like paid offerings, and I had it just under the content tag to start off with. But now I kind of want to evolve that a little bit so that I have because what was happening is I had too much of my content ideas and things that I want to create later that I needed to capture just kind of clogged up my tasks. And I wanted to have a slightly different like process and template for certain products that I want to release, because then I can just pre-populate all of the products.
So are your content ideas tasks?
Right now, yes.
That's what I thought. I'm gonna guess you're not using priorities on those tasks.
Yes, some of them, but not too much.
Because the way that I treat my ideas is I
Mhm.
categorize my ideas via priority. And obviously,
Ah.
paid ideas are high priority
Mm.
because they're paid. I'd much rather have a like financial product as like a higher priority. If I'm going to pick between, I've got 10 hours, do I want to do this video on YouTube or this course thing? Well,
Mm.
priority, I would lean towards the paid thing.
That is something that I'm also
That's how I do
in.
it.
I just put this into my extended brain project as well, actually, of like I might actually change my priority system or add like a more nuanced version because I'm still freezing on like the decisions of like, well, what's low, what's medium, what's high. And so I'm like, okay, what would it be? And it's kind of like, for me, what I teach is like what is necessary and needs to be done, what is like nice for later, and what is not now. And it's exactly the same
That's
language.
exactly what I
Oh my
do.
God. Yeah.
That's exactly what
And
I
so
do.
that's actually what I'm thinking of changing the terminology slightly so that it fits more with the way that my brain works because it's as simple as just renaming the template.
I mean, in my head, because the way I add tasks is with the quick add plugin. So Alt T, type out the task name, and then I just select the priority. So
Mm.
I don't even look at it as high priority. I just look at it as 2 arrows, like 2 up arrows, because obviously
Mm.
it's a drop down. So in my head, I'm like, do I need to do this now? Yes, 2 arrows. No. Okay, let's go down to 1 arrow. Is this something I want to do in the next like day or two? Yes. 1 arrow. No, I just leave it blank. Is this not important at all? It's just something that is appeared. A down arrow.
Yeah.
And it's automatically sorted inside of my daily view. So I know when I look at the top of my daily view, these are the things you should be doing. And then because those tasks are in my daily note, if I add something in a page, if I add a question in a page, which automatically goes to the bottom of my to do section, I know it's different because I've done Alt Q and I'm on the page rather than Alt T. And then if I'm adding a content idea, I know that's going to be Alt C because content. And because I've done Alt C, it'll then say, instead of task name, it'll say content name. And when I see content name instead of task name, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a different priority thing.
Okay, I haven't installed the task plugin. I've been super fucking busy, so I need to talk to you
Task
about
or
that.
quick add?
Well, both.
I thought you used tasks.
No, I don't actually have the task plugins. I use tasks, but as it is like at the beginning, I don't have the task plugin. I don't have quick add in there yet.
Right.
Purely because I was just like, I'm just going to play with this a little bit longer to be sure that
So
actually
you're
I
still on
want to
data
use
view.
it. Yes, I'm still pure data view right now.
Right. Yeah, I'm not.
But even interesting.
I have like one data view query because task plugin can't do it. That's basically it. The task
What is the
plugin can't.
one?
So it can't look for outlinks of a task.
So I assume you do that in like your dashboards and stuff.
Yeah, so it's basically the related tasks query. I still use data view for
Mm.
that because it can look for links, but it can't look for specific outlinks inside of a
Outlinks that
task.
link back. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to chat with you anyway, because like you're talking about all these things, and I'm like, oh yeah. Because I'm now at a point, like what I don't want to do is just add new things,
Hmm.
because that is what happened in Notion. Now I
Hmm.
realize, and I want to avoid that, but I realize actually that doesn't matter if I add everything in there because I can easily just go, boop, gone. So there's that as
And do
well.
what you did earlier with all the plugins, because when we went through your vault, you were like, oh yeah, I have a lot of plugins that you never used.
Yeah.
They weren't thrown at your face.
Yeah. Whereas with Notion, you add something, it's thrown in your face. Yeah, exactly. And so now I'm just like, oh, this is kind of interesting. I could think about this in this way and all of this stuff and blah, 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 blah. So
You wouldn't know you've got quick add unless you use the hotkeys for quick add, or you type in a Q in your command palette, and then it's like quick add, quick add, quick add, quick add.
yeah,
same,
you'll have to
same
show
with
me around your quick ad because I like the way that you're
same with
think about
Obsidian Git. Like I don't know Obsidian Git's there, and like every 10 minutes it says pushed however many changes to your Git backup. I'm like, cool. But that's it. I don't do any settings or anything like that, and it just backs up my Vault every 10
But
minutes.
don't you have Obsidian Sync?
Yes.
Why both? Is it a just pure backup?
Partly pure backup, partly because inside the insider builds, when they first release stuff, when you sync stuff to your phone, because the phone version is different from the desktop version, there can be some confusion, and I don't like having to go back to the file explorer because sometimes the file explorer gets confused with the phone sync. So I don't lose anything; it's still there. It's just hard to find things. And because of Git, because of what Git does, it gives me so much more flexibility in looking at my history. So I can look at a commit history and know exactly what I did in the last 10 minutes because it shows me.
Oh, that's really cool. I might chat to you about that as well then.
Yeah, and then I can also look at a file. So I can click on a file, I can see all the changes I made in the file because it's all committed. And then I can do that for my entire Vault. So I have a Vault history, file history, and commit history. And even though you have that with Obsidian Sync and the file recovery, because it functions the same way, you have to go into file recovery and then look at each individual version of the file.
Yeah.
And it's not as easy.
So, yeah. And also I know from other research that there's the ability to do automations with Git that you don't have, and so that's another reason why I'm like, okay, cool, now I want to. I've got to a place now with this system where I'm like, okay, I've got the basics down, I know how I want to use it, I know how now it's time to like add the cherry on the top.
So the way that my course is going to be formatted when the new update comes out is beginner, intermediate, and experienced. The beginner is, hey, these are the apps, this is how you install, download, blah, blah, blah. Intermediate is, hey, here's loads of things that you could do, this is my workflow. Have a bit of an exploration and see what fits. Experienced is, okay, this is a really small nuanced use case that you can add on that could help. And the way that I've tiered that is through priorities. So the high priority is the beginner, medium is intermediate, and then low is the experienced. But you would be moving into that, hey, here's some really nuanced thing that might help you.
Yeah. I'm going to definitely be talking to you about Quick Add because like I am now in a place where I want that because then I can be anywhere and just add tasks because that's what I faced when I was in the retreat.
Were you on your phone or laptop or?
I was on my laptop.
All right, okay. Yeah, because on your phone you can add the quick adds, but it comes up as like a question mark command in your
I know
bar.
it's the same as something else, templater, I think it is.
Yeah, templater. Because they're not default plugins. Obsidian doesn't have an icon for it.
I wish that we could add icons for it.
In process.
Oh, cool.
There is a mobile plugin it's like a mobile editor plugin, and that's what it tries to do. It tries to customize the Obsidian mobile to match the desktop. I haven't explored it much yet because there's been like 300 other plugins I've been looking at instead.
It's a mobile editor, is it?
I think. I can't remember. I remember looking at it. I remember looking at the front page of it, looking at roughly what it does.
Advanced mobile toolbar.
And that's the one. Yeah, I remember seeing it and then looking at the front page. I was like, oh,
sorry.
Exactly.
I was like, custom icons. You can add custom icons to any quick action that don't have their own icon already.
Exactly. And I was like, that's why I said in process, because I know it can be done, but I don't know how because I haven't looked at it yet. Yeah. So, like I say, in progress.
Okay, I'm getting excited now. Just gonna leave it alone.
Right. So I think
that... Oh yeah, hi by the way. We're still talking, you're just joining into the conversation now.
I was gonna say I think that's probably a good place to call the podcast because now we're gonna just like share loads of screens backwards and forwards and it's gonna become a mess.
Yeah. Bye.